I'm Carol Westby from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm very pleased to be with you today and to share one of my favorite topics, play and language, the roots of literacy. In Albuquerque, I supervise first-year speech-language pathologists for bilingual multicultural services. I also produce Word of Mouth, which is a newsletter for speech-language pathologists working in schools. I'm a member of the American Board of Child Language and Language Disorders and a consultant for the Global Tales Project, being done by the Child Language Committee of the International Association of Logopedics and Phoniatrics. We're looking at development of personal narratives in 10-year-olds around the world. And I'm also a member of the IALP Autism Committee. At the end of this session, you should be able to explain the role of play in social, emotional, language, and literacy development, evaluate children's pretend symbolic play skills, and advocate for children's play opportunities. Play for young children isn't just recreation activity. It's not leisure time activity or escape activity. It's thinking time for young children, language time, problem solving time, memory time, planning time, investigating time. It's organization of ideas time when the young child uses his mind and body and his social skills and all his powers in response to the stimuli he has met. Play is important in education also. Problem solving in most school subjects requires a great deal of make-believe. Children have to visualize how persons in other cultures live, read stories, imagine a story, write it down, solve arithmetic problems, determine what will come next. History, geography, literature are all make-believe. All of these are conceptual constructions that are never directly experienced by a child. Now, a number of researchers have said you don't need to play in order to develop language and literacy, and that's true. Play isn't essential for language and literacy, but it is one of many routes towards that development. And children who engage in playful interactions learn what children do in direct instruction, but they learn more in areas that are not associated directly with literacy, but are still important for school success. Today, we're looking specifically at pretend and symbolic play in children 18 months to 6 years of age and how that's related to language and literacy. Now, pretend play is acting out real-life scenarios, replicating activities that children have done or they've seen others do. For play to be pretend, children must recognize they are pretending. And that requires intrapersonal theory of mind. They have to be aware of their own thoughts and feelings. And to pretend, children need to have a sense of themselves, which is an aspect of this intrapersonal theory of mind. Here are two ways that sense of self has been assessed. One is visually, perceptually. You put a spot on the child's forehead, not letting him know you've done that, and then put the child in front of a mirror. A youngster under 18 months will tend to touch the mirror, but around 18 months, children recognize that that's a reflection of themselves, and they will reach up and try to wipe the spot off of their own forehead. Another approach to assessing sense of self is seeing if the child has a proprioceptive awareness of their body. Here, researchers have attached a little rug to a shopping cart. They put the toddler on the rug and then tell the toddler, push the cart to mommy. Well, around 18 months, children develop an awareness of their body, and they realize that as long as they're standing on that rug, that cart is going nowhere, and they step off of the rug to push the cart. Those are both examples of a sense of self. Now, symbolic play can have three types of components. There's object substitution, where the child uses one object in place of another. So they use a banana for a telephone or yarn for spaghetti. Or they imagine absent objects or assign absent or false attributes. So they might say that a plastic teapot is hot, or this boy pretends he has a key to turn on his imaginary car. Or children treat a doll as an agent. They have the doll carry out the activity. Now, in the literature, the terms pretend and symbolic play have often been used interchangeably, but increasingly we're realizing they're not exactly the same. Symbolic play is pretend, but what looks like pretend, and in fact may be pretend, is not necessarily symbolic. A child holding the phone to his ear may be pretending, but it can also just be functional use. That's what you do with a phone. So we're seeing in the literature a hesitancy to use the word pretend, because often we're not exactly certain. Is the child really pretending unless they explicitly tell us they are? Now, symbolic play has 4 dimensions. There's theory of mind. What roles does the child take or give to others? There's use of props, or does the child use language to set the scene? There's the theme or the topic of the play, and then there's how organized the play is. In this session, we're going to look at development in each of these play dimensions, starting at 17 months and moving up to around 5 or 6 years. These 4 dimensions of play are all interactive, and in typically developing children contribute to one another. Simultaneously, those 4 dimensions of play interact with the child's structural and semantic pragmatic language. This is chicken egg. The better the play, the better the language, the better the language, the better the play. Now, Perfetti has said that reading comprehension requires that readers build a mental model or representation of the situation or world, real or imagined, that's described in the text. They have to have a mental model. Realize that when children are engaged in pretend symbolic play, they're developing a mental model in their head of that play situation. So symbolic pretend play provides children with opportunities for building mental models. Now let's look at each of these dimensions and how they're related in play and reading. First, theory of mind. What role does the child take or give to others? The act of pretending requires an intrapersonal theory of mind. The child needs to be aware, this is not real, I'm only pretending. And more advanced symbolic play requires that the youngster be able to think about the thoughts and emotions of the characters that they're pretending to be. Interpersonal theory of mind. Reading comprehension, particularly of stories, requires that the youngsters recognize the emotions of characters in stories. They make inferences about characters' thoughts and emotions. So there are multiple types of theory of mind. The intrapersonal, the child's awareness of their own thoughts and mental states, and their awareness of their own emotions and regulating their emotions. And then there are the interpersonal aspects of theory of mind, recognizing other person's thoughts, making inferences about their thoughts and behaviors, and recognizing and making inferences about the emotions of others. A number of years ago, students in one of our national reading assessments were asked to read a story about turtle and spider and then answer some questions. This was for an assessment of children in 4th grade. And in this story, Anansi the spider asks Turtle to come to lunch, and Anansi lives on top of a high hill. Turtle crawls out of his creek, crawls up the dusty path, gets to Spider's house, and Spider looks at him and says, "Your feet are filthy. You go back down and wash your feet." So Turtle crawls back down the hill, washes his feet, crawls back up. But again, when the spider looks at him, he says, your feet are still filthy. Go wash them. By the time Turtle gets up to the spider's house the third time, Spider's eaten all the food. One of the test questions was, when Turtle remains quiet about his mistreatment by Spider, the author wants you to believe Turtle's afraid, have sympathy for Turtle, feel dislike for Turtle, think Turtle deserve no dinner. There's nothing in the story I just told you that gives you the answer to this question. You have to use your interpersonal theory of mind to answer that question. Now, let's look at theory of mind development. 17 to 19-month-old child begins to engage in auto-symbolic pretend. It's pretend on themselves. They pretend to eat or to sleep. The 19 to 22-month-old begins to pretend on dolls or stuffed animals. These toys are passive, however. Now, don't credit a child with playing on a doll if you only see one instance. You need to see some frequency of that pretend and some diversity. So giving the doll a bottle, feeding the doll with a spoon, bathing the doll, combing the doll's hair, putting the doll to bed. Here's an example of a 19 to 22 month engaging in this level of play. And we're also going to see an emerging instance of symbolic play.
Pillow. You got the pillow? What are you going to do?
Pillow. Pillow.
Pillow?
Baby.
You got the baby?
Pillow.
Oh, are you putting baby to bed? You got the blanket? Aww. What's the baby doing? What's the baby doing, Allie? You got, oh, the baby's making doo-doo?
So Allie says the baby's making doo-doo. That's an object that is not present. So that can be an instance of symbolic play. 3.5-year-olds begin to credit their stuffed animals and dolls as having feelings. And along with that, children begin to give agency to those toys. Here's an early example of agency. Simba and her mom have been making a face out of Play-Doh, and then the mom's going to trigger this agency by pretending that that face is alive.
Oh, what did you make, Simba? Yes. Oh, that's nice. What is it? Can you tell me what's on there? I heard a mouth and eyes.
So mom says, it's gonna get you.
No.
Mom's treating it as though it's alive. Here it comes, here it comes.
She says, here it comes.
And she begins to chase her brother with the face. So giving agency to that face. 3.5-year-olds both talk to the doll or the puppet and talk for the doll and the puppet. In this photo, Jerem is talking for the puppet saying, I want soda. And he's responding, you can't have it. It's not good for you. 4-year-olds begin to take on roles. Here are 2 4-year-olds at our preschool for the deaf. Simone had been to several weddings recently, so she knew how the bride dressed and how she walked and talked. And here she's coerced John into being the groom. And 4-year-olds like taking on often superhero roles. Little girls often like playing the Disney princesses. And 3 and 4-year-olds now are beginning to play together. Younger children might play side by side, but they're not really playing together. 3 and 4-year-olds will play together and exchange some toys, but they're not really negotiating the play. Cooperative social play emerges in typically developing children around 4, where together they plan out what they're playing and how they're playing it out. Here is a video clip from Australia, where I was privileged to spend a couple months a little while back. And in Australia, play is a part of the curriculum for all children through 2nd grade. This is a classroom for reception and 1st grade children with developmental language impairments. And this is early in playing a veterinarian script. So we're going to see Nicole, the teacher, doing a lot of modeling, a lot of scaffolding to give the children ideas of what they can do in this kind of play.
Okay, you're going to go in? Oh, do you want me? Oh, okay, I'll come in. All right. Thank you. Yep. Well, he's just a puppy, but he's got a really sore paw. You be really careful because he's really scared. It's his paw. Yeah. What do you think's wrong?
I don't know. He's got like one of these in here.
A grass seed? Does he have a grass seed in his paw?
He's got a fish in there.
A fish? Maybe a bone. Maybe is there a bone stuck?
So she's trying to
Stand
follow
on
up
something sharp.
on comments that Courtney, the little girl, is
It is a
making.
dog. It's a puppy. Are you going to take an X-ray? All right.
This is what's in his bone. It's broken.
Oh, he's got a broken leg. Is it a broken leg or broken paw?
Broken paw.
Oh, what can we do?
We can fix it.
Oh, is this to stop it from hurting him?
So
Okay.
she gives the dog a shot. The teacher says,
good
"Oh, to
dog.
stop from hurting."
You might need to get the bandages ready.
Yes, we're going to get bandages.
Yeah.
This is going to go on a while. They're going to need to give the dog medicine, decide when and how to give the medicine. And then it's going to be time for Nicole to leave with
Does he
her
need
puppy.
to come back to have it off, the bandages off?
Oops.
Courtney, does he need to come back to have the bandages off?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that all?
Yep.
Oh, he was a good dog. Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Nicole takes the medicine. New patient comes in.
Hi, I've come to pay my bill for my puppy. Oh, thank you. Yep, here's the money.
Good.
Thank you. I might make an appointment for 2 weeks because
Okay. So she needs to pay, make another appointment. Okay. These are also elementary school age youngsters. These children came to us in kindergarten with very severe developmental language impairment. They had several hours a week of play-based language intervention. And this particular year, we took this classroom of kids to Disneyland. So we were doing a lot of role playing, so the children are going to know what's happening and how to behave. This is shortly before we're going. And Cindy, the SLP, says, "What are we playing today?" And Ernestine says, "Going to Disneyland." But she says to the SLP, "I don't want to take my kids." And she had never said this before. And the SLP says, "Well, you can't leave them at home." And Ernestine says, "I know, I'll hire a babysitter." So here we're seeing the youngsters negotiate more of this play themselves. Cindy's going to be on the sidelines, though, and make this situation a little difficult for them.
Hello? Hello? Please, can't you take care of my baby? Of course I can. Because I'm going to California for 3 days. Okay. I'll come. Please, would you come? I will. Okay, bye. Thank you. I'll be there.
He drives over in an imaginary car.
So we can go.
Knocks on an imaginary door.
No, no. Who is it? A babysitter. Come here. It's a babysitter. Baby food. No. Wait, put it back. How'd it go? 20. That's $30. And if you want to fix, you set it to 8. Here's some pizza.
Now I've cut the tape. She goes off and gets ready to go. She's all dressed for her trip.
Have you packed your bags and called for reservations? They haven't. Have you packed your bags and called your reservations? Oh no. Let's finish. To see if there's a plane.
Go ahead, Albert, you do it.
Oh.
So Albert's going to call.
Back in the books.
Oh, Albert, I think you should call. Albert, let Albert call. Hello? Yes, this is TWA. May I help you?
Is there a plane to go to California?
To California. When would you like to leave?
Today. Right now.
Today?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. People usually make reservations weeks ahead of time. I have to check on my computer to see if we have an opening for today. For how many people?
2.
For 2. Hold on a few minutes.
Okay.
Yes, who am I speaking to?
Albert Lopez.
Well, Mr. Lopez, we only have an opening for one person.
He knows he's in trouble.
Okay. That's one of the planes.
What would you like for me to do?
Nothing. Oh, wait.
So he tells her that he'll call her back.
Call me later? Okay, that'll be fine. I'll be waiting. Thank you for calling TWA.
Now, Ernestine hasn't followed what's been going on, and Albert does not want to tell her.
All right. Look at my whole stack. Are we going? Yeah. Look at. Oh, I guess we have to. Look, I'm really going shopping.
I'm not here, Albert.
Tell
Tell her what happened. Tell her the problem.
I know. I'm supposed to.
So he tells her.
You mean I had to get dressed for nothing? Just to get dressed and call the babysitter?
So you realize why he didn't want to tell her what happened. Well, they're going to have to problem solve this, call the airlines back, find out if there's some other planes they can take. 5 to 6-year-olds take on multiple roles in their play. This is a typically developing 5-year-old. Single child parents weren't very familiar with child development, and they wanted an assessment before the youngster started school. She's playing here with the little Fisher-Price finger puppet squirrels. She has the mother squirrel say to the little boy squirrel, well, go and take your bath and put on your blue pajamas. And now you can watch the Disney Channel and I'll make you some hot chocolate. She then takes the little squirrel into the log, puts him to bed, comes out and says to the father squirrel, we really should think about having another baby. Maybe we should go to the doctor and talk about it. And you realize she's overheard something she was not supposed to hear, but you also realize she knows that's mommy daddy talk. That's not mommy little boy talk. Now, Wolf and Hicks observed kindergarten children engaged in their pretend play and noticed that when they use these multiple strands of discourse, they better comprehended the stories that teachers read to them. Now, what we mean by these multiple strands of discourse, let's imagine that they're pretending that there's an evil dragon that's threatening the castle. And in the narrative mode, they said, we've got to get ready for the dragon. You know, he's always trying to burn down our castle. And we're really afraid of what he's going to do. Narrative mode. Then they might jump into character dialogue. Oh no. Do you see that back in the sky? There's smoke there. I bet that's the dragon coming. And then a youngster might go into stage managing, speaking as themselves outside of the story. They might turn to the teacher and say, you got anything I could use as a bucket? I need to throw water on that fire-breathing dragon. Now, Wolf and Hicks said, the reason we see a relationship between those strands of discourse in play and in comprehending stories is that a number of children's stories have those strands of discourse. Here's an example of that. The Doghouse by Jan Thomas. And these 4 animal friends are playing ball. And then the book says, oh no, the ball went into the doghouse. Narrative mode. Then the next page, the author says, who will get it out? That's stage managing. And then on the next page, mouse volunteers, cow will, cow's big, cow's brave, cow's strong, moo. That's character dialogue. Children who engage in more elaborate theory of mind in their play have a broader range of language for negotiation. Instead of just saying, you can't have it, it's mine. They give reasons and counter reasons and conditionals and compromises. Now let's look at decontextualization. What props is the child using, or to what degree do they use language to set the scene? Substituting one object for another in play requires mental modeling. You have to be able to decontextualize. And the more you decontextualize, the more you have to use language so your peers know what you're doing. You're going to have more descriptive language, more complex sentences. As I mentioned earlier, Perfetti said you have to be able to create mental models in your head of those stories you're listening to or reading. In pretend play, children are getting practice creating those mental models. And in comprehending the stories you're listening to and reading, you've got to develop more complex vocabulary, understand more complex syntax. 17-month-olds to around 3-year-olds need some realistic props in their play. Children under 3 aren't good at really playing with small representational toys. They exhibit what we call scale errors. Researchers have taken toddlers into a playroom with large toys, let them, for example, ride this cart around. And then they take the child out of the room and take the life-size toys out of the room, substitute small toys, send the child back in, and children under 3 will still try to fit themselves in that little car. Around 3, children can use these smaller representational toys. And with that, we also then see them beginning to give agency to these toys. They're starting to, rather than just stack up blocks, make something out of the block. They begin to build bridges or enclosures. And they're gradually using more of language in these mental models to contribute to the play. Jerem finds a saw. He imagines the tree and cuts off imaginary limbs that he throws into the backyard. You want to look for the ways children substitute objects in play. It's an early type of symbolic play. Now, in the US, we do not allow children to bring anything that looks like any type of weapon to a school. But there's something about children, particularly 4-year-old boys, that really like weapons. So even though you say no guns, you can shoot with pencils and rulers and umbrellas and brooms. So look for multiple substitutions in children's play. Now, in their imaginary play, children are often drawing on their own experiences, and that requires they draw on their autobiographical memory, their memory of personally experienced events. So our children can draw on their experience at Disneyland. Now, there are two aspects to autobiographical memory. There's the semantic aspect, knowing facts and details. Disneyland's in California, and there's Fantasyland, and Cinderella's castle's in Fantasyland, and you're probably going to meet Mickey Mouse. That's just facts. That's just knowing. You can know that even if you haven't been to Disneyland. There's the episodic aspect of the memory, and that's the feeling of being back there, the sensory experience. I have a strong autobiographical episodic memory of my first ride on Space Mountain. So it's a fast roller coaster in the dark with annoying sound and bright flashing lights. When children are playing in decontextualized ways, they're having to engage in what we call scene construction. They're having to build that scene in their head. Who was with us? Where were we? What were we doing? Play gives us opportunities to help build autobiographical memories. Albuquerque, where I live, is the international balloon capital of the world. And the first week of every October, hundreds of thousands of people will come to watch the 800 balloons. We take our kids out to the balloon fiesta. We help develop information for semantic memory by often reading stories. This is a story about a cat who gets caught on a hot air balloon. The youngsters go out to the balloon fiesta, and this particular year, the teacher in SLP convinced some pilots to tether the balloons, and kids got to go up on tethered balloons. They're coming back. They're playing that experience. It's a strong emotion associated with it. They're reconstructing that scene. And very helpful for adults to reminisce with children in that scene construction, encouraging high autonomy, following the child's lead, not you asking questions that you want the child to answer, and elaborating on things the child says. So the child says, I talked to the balloon pilot, and the adult says, what did he tell you? How to make the balloon go up? Oh, yeah, he showed you how to pull the cord to ignite the burner, and that made the air inside the balloon hot, and the hot air made the balloon rise. The burner was real hot. Yeah, it was very hot, so you needed to be careful not to touch it. And then the balloon went up. I think you were a little bit scared when it left the ground. 4 and 5-year-olds are engaging in even more elaborate block building. They have a better mental representation of buildings. These are two very old slides. Again, I live in New Mexico, which is a border state. The 70% of the population are of non-Northern European heritage, a very large Hispanic population and Native American population. This was many years ago when there was a lot of warfare in Guatemala. We had a Hispanic governor who said, if you can get yourself across the border, there will be no questions asked. The school system set up some evaluation programs for us to try to figure out what were we dealing with: post-traumatic stress, malnutrition, real disabilities. And in interviewing some of these families, some of them told us your best chance of survival when the guerrillas came into the village was to hide in the church because they might respect the sanctuary of the church. Look at what these youngsters are building. The blocks are over on a shelf, and it sure looks to me like they have built a church. They had that mental model in their heads. So 4-year-olds can engage in highly elaborate symbolic play. Here, Renee's come in with her brother who has autism. She puts her stuffed dog on the chair across from them, pretend she has the key, that she's turning on the car, driving, and then says to Tony, hey, Tony, we're at the movies. We're watching a movie about a kitty. Tony looks and says, doggy, And she said, I know it's a doggy, but we're pretending it's a movie about a kitty. So language is setting most of the scene in this play. Highly verbal kids create imaginary playmates at this age. We want to do a lot to promote kids' decontextualization. We like the book Not in a Box. And in this book, the little rabbit makes all kinds of things out of boxes: a race car, a fire truck, a spaceship. And we bring in lots of boxes and encourage kids to think about what could they make out of these boxes and incorporate in their play. A number of studies show that the more decontextualized children display, the more literate language they use. Excuse me while I get a drink. They use a wider variety of temporal and causal connectives. They use noun phrases instead of just single nouns. They're better at referencing. They keep the characters straight, and they're often referring to what they're thinking and feeling. Now, decontextualization enables imagining the past and the future. We call autobiographical memory mental time travel. When you're pulling up a memory, you're traveling to the past. And the better able you are to travel to the past, the better able you are to see yourself in the future. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the famous marshmallow test. An adult shows the child a marshmallow and tells the youngster, you can either eat it now or you can wait until I come back and you can have two. Now, some kids see that marshmallow and quickly eat it. That's the end of the marshmallows. But some children stare at the marshmallow, but in their heads, they're seeing two marshmallows. Those children who can see the two marshmallows can wait until that adult comes back. This mental time travel also enables counterfactual reasoning. Both play and counterfactual reasoning involve imagining alternatives to reality and keeping the present representation separate from the representation in your head. Here are preschool children role-playing the car trip. We're also now encouraging this counterfactual reasoning. The fact was, Dad didn't put enough gas in the car. Counter that fact, if Dad had put gas in the car, it would have started. The fact was, the little boy throws up all over the car. Counter that, if he hadn't eaten so much candy, he wouldn't have gotten sick. Here's an example of working on counterfactual thinking in a therapy session with a child with DLD.
Let's imagine for a minute, what would happen if the person in the restaurant wanted to eat something that was not on the menu?
That would be a nice thing to do.
What would we do?
I don't know.
So let's imagine that you're the waitress and I am at the restaurant. And I want a hot dog. Is there a hot dog on our menu?
We don't have any hot dogs on our menu.
Perfect. That's just what you could say. Look right at me and tell me that.
We don't have any hot dogs in our restaurant or our menu.
Oh, you don't have any hot dogs? Then I want you to think what else you could ask. Could you say, would you like something else?
Would you like something else?
Okay, let's try that. I would like a hot dog.
We don't have any hot dogs.
Okay. Now let's consider the themes in play. What are the topics that kids are talking about in their play? And in play, children increasingly have to develop more imaginative stories, but they begin with their autobiographical memories. And really, in reading comprehension, you have to be able to recognize what's the topic, What is this about? And so you're in reading comprehension, you're retrieving your memories of other stories and experiences you've had and making a connection to the present story you're listening to or reading. Here's an example of that. Here's our spider and turtle story again. Spider's behavior during the first part of the story is most like that of mothers protecting their children, thieves robbing banks, runners losing races, people not sharing their wealth. That's requiring the child think about other similar experiences, make a connection between that text and other experiences. So a text to world connection. Those early themes at 17 to 19 months are themes that the children have experienced every day. So it's often going to be cooking and eating experiences. Then they begin to imitate activities of familiar persons around them, things that mom or dad or older siblings might do. 2.5-year-olds begin to play at themes that they've experienced, but not as regularly. So they're pulling up memories, and you best remember things that have emotionality attached to them. So that's why I think we often see shopping, because that's usually fun and you get a treat, and doctor play, because that's not very much fun. I find a lot of children around the world play McDonald's. It's a very familiar experience to so many children. 3.5-year-olds begin to engage in compensatory play. They change their play in the way they wish their lives were. We saw Jerem a little bit earlier in some photos, and in Jerem's home, they would not get soda. It was not considered a good thing to drink. And ice cream would be for special treats. But watch what Jerem does in this play.
Is 2 soda pops for me? 2 for you, huh? Yeah. And here's some soda.
Oh, thank you. Oh, Jan, this is excellent. Well, what is this?
Oh, that's just ice cream.
Do I eat with my fingers?
No, you just pick it up and you just get a spoon. I'll get a spoon. Here. Thank you. Whoops. Don't eat it, y'all.
Oh, how come?
We forgot to pray.
Oh, all right.
Now,
Come here.
in his home, they always say grace, so that has to stay. But he clearly would not be getting 2 cans of soda, let alone 1, and ice cream would not be the main course. 3.5-year-olds begin to pretend at themes they have not personally experienced. They've seen it in the community on TV. They've read stories about it. For many of the youngsters, these are firefighters or police officers. For play at this level, you have to provide experiences to prime the pump so they have ideas of what to do. So using books or having a fireman visit the school or taking the youngsters to the fire station. Later preschool years, children begin to pretend at themes they have not personally experienced. And again, this is going to have to come from some exposure through books and videos. This clip comes from Irene Torres, a speech pathologist friend of mine in New York City. And Irene developed what she called the TRIPS intervention, theme-related integrative play schemas. And over the course of the year, the children would take different kinds of imaginary trips. Each trip would begin with very realistic props, such as this camping trip.
Outside the tent?
Yep.
Okay, and then we're going to put it inside the tent.
Hey, Sean, are you looking?
Inside the tent now, so you don't trip on it.
No, not yet. Hey, Sean, sit down, sit down.
Okay. Who's looking at the tent? You're looking? You are. You can go in the tent.
Kiara.
Kiara, you can go in the tent.
Look at it, and then you can go in.
Irene!
flashlight, right? Okay.
You put the lantern inside the tent?
No.
Or the flashlight? Which one?
Flashlight.
Well,
Flashlight.
how does the lantern work? Do you?
You can see they're very excited about this. This type of play helps promote autobiographical memory. So they start with very realistic props, but then gradually will work their way to using these small representational toys and having these small figures be agents in the play. We see increasing fantasy themes. So again, important that children have content to incorporate in their play. Now in Britain, you are very familiar with kings and queens and castles. We don't have that much in the US, but our children still hear a lot of these stories. So it's also a popular theme, and you can buy castle sets. Now, in many of our large cities, there is an organization of people. They call themselves the Society for Creative Anachronism. And they like role-playing the Middle Ages, and often in the summer, they'll have medieval fairs in the parks. Well, our principal for our preschool for the deaf had some of this group come to the preschool, share with the children their costumes and the kinds of games they played. And then the children and the teachers went to Home Depot to buy nails and lumber, and the parents built this. This is now their castle. There's a drawbridge. They're digging a moat around their castle. And you're wanting them to make connections between the play that they're engaged in other sources of information. So connecting their play in their pretend castle with stories that they're reading and listening to, seeing relationships between different stories. There's a castle in Harry Potter and a castle in the Tale of Despero. Now, we don't have good castles in Albuquerque. We do have this. This was a house built by a very wealthy family a number of years ago. It is called the Castle. It's now the Turquoise Museum. That's as close as we come to a castle. But you have Windsor Castle, making connections between what you're reading and your world. 6-year-olds can create highly imaginative themes, combining bits and pieces of stories. Here we see this 6-year-old has the cowboy Playmobil set, and here is C-3PO and R2-D2, and he has the X-Wing fighter, and he says, boy, will those cowboys be surprised when they meet C-3PO and R2-D2. Okay. And he engages in a clash of cultures. He's never seen or heard that kind of story. And finally, our last dimension, how organized is the play? Is there a temporal and causal sequence to the behaviors in the play? Are the children monitoring their play behaviors? Clearly, reading comprehension, children have to recognize the temporal and causal sequences in stories. We're always asking them what happened first, and then what happened next, and then how did the story end? 17 to 19-month-olds don't have organization in their play. They move from one toy to another. 19 to 22-month-olds begin to combine toys. Lids go on pots and pots go on stoves, and we'll put spoons, plates, and cups together. And when they see relationships between objects, we get the development of 2-word syntax: more milk, milk all gone, my shoes, your hat. Those aren't labels for the objects. They're referring to the relationship among objects. 2-year-olds are classifying related objects. So these youngsters have pulled out the items that you would use for eating and cooking. 3-year-olds engage in an evolving sequence. They don't plan it out ahead of time, but as they finish one aspect of the play, what would be next? Here we see Ernestine and her friends. They're inviting friends to dinner. They prepare the dinner. They serve and eat the meal. They clear the table. They wash the dishes. 4-year-olds plan ahead. Annika knows what she's wanting to build. This is what we saw the Guatemalan children building. They were planning to build a church. 5 and 6-year-olds with good language skills can coordinate play with others. While I'm washing the dishes, you go to the store and get us some ice cream. When I put the kids to bed, you check what good movie is on TV. There's an interaction in later preschool between play and stories. Better play, better stories, better stories, better play. And there's a great interest in narrative skills of children in kindergarten because it's highly predictive of their later social and academic success. Both of them involve symbolic imagination. Number of studies have looked at play dimensions in preschool and later literacy skills in mid-elementary. Children who showed better theory of mind in play in preschool showed greater understanding of the internal states of characters in stories. And when they produced stories that had more characters, and the characters had different perspectives. In preschool, those children who played in more decontextualized ways in elementary school had more elaborate, more descriptive vocabulary. They used a more literate language skill, were much more likely to use more complex syntax, and they were better at pronominal referencing. So you didn't get she had it, she took it, she wanted it, where you're trying to think, is there 1, 2, or 3 she's? Certainly better themes in stories played out in preschool leads to better oral stories in elementary school. And the more organized children's play was in preschool, the more coherent and logically organized were their personal and fictional stories in elementary school. Here we see Ernestine's group again. And I mentioned earlier that this social role play requires scene construction. And here we're seeing this integration of many of the aspects of these 4 play dimensions. They're playing, I come in this day and they're playing that David is dead. Mawson did, for his dissertation, observed play themes in 4-year-olds, and one of the most common themes was pretending I'm dead. I didn't know that when this occurred. And children around 4 have probably experienced a loss of a pet or even a loss of some family member or neighbor. And children under 8 really don't understand that dead means dead forever. I had a social worker talk about this, that it was so hard working with preschool children because the youngster would say, Daddy went to the store and came back. When's Daddy coming back from heaven? So we're going to see a piece of that here. The kids are trying to figure this out. What triggered this play was that 2 community members had died fairly recently, and this is a Hispanic community, and funerals are very elaborate. The cars will be decorated, there'll be music playing, there's going to be a meal at the church afterwards. Kids are trying to pull together all that they've seen.
We gotta decide. Either he's alive
No,
or
he's not
dead.
dead. Yeah, he is.
How many votes for being dead?
Wait.
Alex, let's decide. We have to decide whether he's going to be alive or he's going to be dead.
Okay. He's gonna be
Okay.
dead. He's dead.
We've got David says he's dead. Who else?
Dead.
Albert says he's dead, and Alex says he's dead.
Dead.
We've got 5 deads to 1 alive.
But that's no fair because you know what? Get off of it. Because we both died, we have to go get the funeral car.
What's not
The
fair?
funeral car is part of
What's not fair?
He's in the
part of
hospital.
the memory, part of the scene.
Oh no, and then he came back.
So here you see Anthony saying, "Hey, but he's going to come back," and the other kids don't think so.
He's not breathing and he died. He died.
story the body will know. Why don't we leave him right out?
So crying is part of the scene, the hearse, the bearing of the body, putting these experiences together to make sense out of it. I think the Winnie the Pooh stories are such a great example of a child's imaginary play. And Winnie has said, we didn't realize we were making memories. We just knew we were having fun. And the Irish-British playwright George Bernard Shaw had said, we don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. So continue to play. Children learn a lot in play. I've hoped in this session, I've shown you some of the connections between play that promote comprehension of stories that children listen to and read. There are a lot of things they're learning in play. I'm developing a more elaborate language. I'm developing a sense of story and enhancing my story comprehension. I'm practicing cooperation. I'm developing mobility of thought. I'm following a mental plan. I'm problem solving. I'm developing a good self-concept. I'm learning to take turns. I'm developing motor skills. I'm learning to decenter from my viewpoint. I'm developing classification skills. I'm organizing and conceptualizing my world. I thank you very much for this opportunity to share ideas with play and look forward to some discussion about this topic.